So Jen, let's talk about the gut-brain axis because you kind of alluded to it there. So the
Sure.
gut microbiome, mental health, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these
Mhm.
things we could talk about connected. So talk a
Yep.
little bit about that so the audience understands.
Yeah, so the research on that gut microbiome has been coming out more and more because they're starting to really realize how important it really is. So the microbes within us help us. We're very symbiotic relationships. So the microbes in there help break down the foods that we eat and helps us to, get out the nutrients. And those nutrients go through that small intestinal tract. But they also help to create the neurotransmitters and different things for our body to help create the ATP for the energy. But when we look at that gut-brain axis, the microbes down there talk to our brain. Our brain talks less to our stomach than our stomach talks to our brain. And our gut, the gut itself has neural network on top. And it was fascinating. The other day, I was watching a documentary, and the two things that are created first when a child is created is the brain and the gut, and it
Wow,
actually pulls
interesting.
apart. And so the gut itself has that neural network, and if you think about it, it makes sense because that's what's creating so much of the neurotransmitters, and it has to be able to talk to the brain because of that fuel source. And so up the vagus nerve it goes, and it helps to communicate. Like our oxytocin is made in, a lot of it's made in our gut. The serotonin, about 90 to 95% of that is made in our gut. And so if we put these in terms of mental health, the foods that we're eating, if we're not eating nutrient dense food that provides those microbes what they need, they're not going to be able to create the things, the neurotransmitters that our brain needs to function. And so, if we are taking in, or if our gut microbiome is more bad bacteria than good bacteria, it's not going to be making enough of the neurotransmitters that our brain needs to function at optimal levels. And that's what the sugar can create. That's what, if we're eating a lot of processed foods that have preservatives and additives, that's going to create more of a dysbiosis, and that's going to fuel more bad bacteria than good. And so there we lose all of the things that help to make our brain healthier because it's not getting the nutrients that it needs to process. And when we were talking about sugar, when you bring up dementia and Alzheimer's, functional medicine has been looking at that as type 3 diabetes. And that goes back to those glucose levels going up and down, up and down. And the way that it affects the brain, because the glucose, there's too much coming into the brain to function. So it's getting overloaded. And so whenever we have that excessive dopamine hit, people will talk about being addiction. What happens is you always have to have more because it kind of dulls the dopamine hit. So you have to keep pushing more. Same kind of premise when we're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's is that it's looking at it from saying, okay, it keeps getting hit with all of the sugar and it's too much. So it has to dull the responsiveness. So if we think about it a little bit in those terms, we can start to see the pattern forming that the things that we're eating really do impact how our brains function. And then later on in life, if it can form into a dementia and Alzheimer's.